We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th canto, 20th chapter, 22nd text. Kaye Balis Tasya Mahavibhute Saharvigacharya Sarasya Darshan Vishwam Trigunam Gunatmake Utendriya Artasya Patendriya Arsya Jiva Yuktam Patendriya Arsya Jiva Yuktam Patendriya Arsya Jiva Yuktam Kaye Balis Tasya Mahatvibhute Kaye Balis Tasya Mahavibhute Saharvigacharya Sadasya Etat Saharvigacharya Sadasya Etat Darsha Vishwam Trigunam Gunatmake Darsha Vishwam Trigunam Gunatmake Utendriyartasya Jiva Yuktam Utendriyartasya Jiva Yuktam Kaye Balistasya Mahavibhute Acharya Sadasya Etat Darsha Vishwam Trigunam Gunatmake Utendriya Artahasya Jiva Yuktam Kaye Balistasya Mahavibhute Saharvigacharya Sadasya Etat Darsha Vishwam Trigunam Gunatmake Utendriya Tasya Jiva Yuktam Kaye in the body. Bali Maharaj Bali. Tasya the personality of Godhead. Mahavibhute that person who is equipped with all wonderful opulences. Saharvigacharya Sadasya with all the priests. Acharyas and members of the Holy Assembly. Etat, this. The Darsha, Vishwam, the whole universe. Trigunam, made of three modes of material nature. Guna Atmake, in that which is the source of all such qualities. Bhuta, with the gross material elements. Indriya, with the senses. Artha, with the sense objects. Shaya, with mind, intelligence, and false ego. Jiva Yuktam, with all the living entities. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Bali Maharaj, along with all the priests, acharyas, and members of the assembly, observed the Supreme Personality of Godhead's universal body, which was full of 6 opulences. That body contained everything within the universe, including all the gross material elements, the senses, the sense objects, the mind, intelligence, and false ego, the various kinds of living entities, and the actions and reactions of the three modes of material nature. Repeat. Bali Maharaj, along with all the priests, acharyas, and members of the assembly, observed the Supreme Personality of Godhead's universal body, which was full of six opulences. That body contained everything within the universe, including all the gross material elements, the senses, the sense objects, the mind, intelligence and false ego, the various kinds of living entities, and the actions and reactions of the three modes of material nature. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarva privartate. Krishna is the origin of everything. Vasudeva kaham sarvamiti. Krishna is everything. Matstani sarvabhutani nachaham teshvavastita. Everything rests in the body of the Lord, yet the Lord is not everywhere. Mayavadi philosophers think that since the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, has become everything, he has no separate existence. Their philosophy is called Advaitavada. Actually, however, their philosophy is not correct. Here, Bali Maharaj was the seer of the personality of Godhead's universal body, and that body was that which was seen. Thus there is Dvaitavada. There are always two entities, the seer and the seen. The seer is a part of the whole, but he is not equal to the whole. The part of the whole, the seer, is also one with the whole, but since he is but a part, he cannot be the complete whole at any time. This achintya beta beta, simultaneous oneness and difference, is the perfect philosophy propounded by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The verse again. Bali Maharaj, along with all the priests, acharyas, and members of the assembly, observed the Supreme Personality of Godhead's universal body, which was full of six opulences. That body contained everything within the universe, including all the gross material elements, the senses, the sense objects, the mind, intelligence, and false ego, the various kinds of living entities, and the actions and reactions of the three modes of material nature. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam vangayate girim yat kripa tarham bande Shri Gurudina Tarane. Bali Maharaj is famous for his charitable attitude, for his giving and charity. And he is noted as one of the 12 Mahajans, Balir Vyasaki Bayam, along with Shukadeva Goswami and Yamaraj and others. So he's not an ordinary person. For a king to give up his entire kingdom is a very great act of charity. So Bali was not an ordinary person. An ordinary person doesn't even like to give up a small amount of anything that that person possesses. A king, in prior yugas, the king was the king of not just one country, but of the whole planet. So to give that up is a very great thing. Not only was it a very great thing, but he was giving it to Vishnu, who sided with his enemies. Bali Maharaj was born in the family of demonic people, being a descendant of Prahlad Maharaj, the grandson of Prahlad Maharaj. So when he gave something to Vishnu, he was actually giving in charity to an associate of his enemies, the demigods. The demigods and the demonic people are always at odds or at war with each other. So it was a very great thing and unprecedented in the sense that he was going against the advice or orders of his spiritual master, Shukracharya. Shukracharya is called by Prabhupada in a previous verse as merely a priest of routine rituals. Merely a priest of routine rituals. So he was a guru and he was a priest, but he was overruled his order was overruled. Ordinarily, this is not done, and it's considered kind of a transgression or a bad thing to do, to violate the orders of the guru. But as I said before, Bali Maharaj was not an ordinary person. And because he was a pure devotee and one of the Mahajans, he was able to overrule his guru. His guru had taught him that he should surrender everything, that Vishnu was the supreme owner of everything, and that whenever Vishnu requests something, he should be granted his request. So Bali Maharaj was kind of thinking to himself that Vishnu has come in a disguised form to him and asked, as a beggar. He asked him for only 3 steps of land. Shukracharya, however, advised Bali Maharaj not to give these 3 steps of land. So Bali Maharaj was thinking that all through my life as a disciple, you've instructed me to do the right thing, that Vishnu is the owner of everything, and that everything should be surrendered to him, and that one should be surrendered to him. And now you are saying that I should not give him what he asks. So therefore, he was thinking, Bali Maharaj, I'm guessing what he was thinking, that I reject you. And he did reject the orders of his guru. It was a very unusual thing to do. Sometimes so-called moral activities are seemingly breached by pure devotees. Like when Krishna advised Bhima to strike Duryodhana below the belt, which is against Kshatriya rules. When Krishna was cavorting with young married women in the middle of the night, and when Karna, who was on the side of Duryodhana, the Kurus, was off his chariot, and Krishna advised Arjuna to now attack and kill him, which is against Kshatriya rules, because when a person is off his chariot, that was definitely a moral transgression to attack someone who is bereft of his chariot. And yet, because Krishna ordered these things to be done, and Krishna was directly a part of all these things, it was okay. There's a thing called clergy abuse, where people abuse the right of being a priest or a guru or somewhat of an elevated person, so-called, and they use that office or that privilege to exploit people. And that is actually a very wrong thing. But when Krishna directly orders it or enacts the thing, then it can be done. It's a very rare and unusual occurrence, but in this case it was done, and in other cases it was done, and Krishna advised. So Bali Maharaj is very famous for his giving everything away, including his whole kingdom. And as we know, as the story goes, that Vamanadev came to him as a very small dwarf Brahmin, and asked for just 3 steps of land. And Shukracharya kind of knew that this was a scheme or a trick of Vishnu to get Bali to surrender. And 3 steps of land didn't seem like very much. So Bali, being very charitable by nature, was eager to give everything he had to a Brahmin, even though he was Vishnu in disguise. And as we read in this verse, he expanded into the universal form before he took the 3 steps that he asked for. And the first step covered the whole world, and the second step covered the whole universe. And he didn't have any place to put his 3rd step, except directly on the head of Bali Maharaj, which he did. And Bali Maharaj was blessed by Vishnu in this case. And he showed to not only Bali, but all the people who were present there, his universal form, which was a very unusual and very special thing to see, the universal form, people getting born and reborn and dissolved, and as it said here, he was increasing in size, and he saw everything within his body, including the earth, the planetary systems, the sky, the directions, the various holes in the universe, the seas, the oceans, the birds, the beasts, human beings, and demigods, and the great sacred persons. So this is an unusual thing. Giving in charity is much adored, even in this age, and in this part of the world, which is part of this western part of the world, which is a very unfortunate place to in a sense, a very unfortunate place to be in. And even the Australian and the American governments give charitably minded persons a break. They sort of reduce their taxes. There's something in England, I think Prabhupada Das knows about this. There's something called Deeds of Covenant. He was a lawyer. And covenant is a very interesting word, because one of the definitions is that it's a biblical term, and it means an agreement that's made between God and his subjects. Anyway, in England they have something called the Deed of Covenant. As I remember, I don't know if Prabhupada can confirm this is correct, but a Deed of Covenant is something that people who can afford to give in charity to a charitable organization. And ISKCON is considered a charitable organization. I was involved in registering ISKCON. Pardon? It has been abolished at the moment. But it did exist. There was something called the Deed of Covenant. And as I remember, the person who made the Deed of Covenant would get his taxable income reduced. Yeah. Anyway, it doesn't exist anymore. But covenant's kind of an unusual word, and I think there's a similar kind of law in this country and for sure in the United States, that if you give a certain amount of your income to a charity, then you get a bit of a concession, a tax concession. So charity is considered a good thing, and it's one of the qualities actually of a Brahmin who's said in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita to be characterized by heroism and many other good qualities. One of the qualities is dana or danya, or giving, and giving of charity. And the giving of charity is a good thing, is considered a good thing. Even though Kshatriyas could have a lot of things, they had special privileges, they could rule, they could have a big palace, they could have many wives, and they had special privileges, they could hunt. But of all, even though they had great wealth and great many things, they were very charitable. And they would see that no one went hungry or unclothed or without shelter in their kingdoms. These were the Kshatriyas of yore. I don't think they exist anymore. I mean, there's probably a few people that are that charitable, but anyway, it doesn't exist. Anyway, when I was involved in England in registering the ISKCON entity, first that was fairly easy getting it registered, but then we applied to something that's called the Charity Commission. I think that still exists, the Charity Commission. And at the time that we made the application, the Charity Commissioner, somebody informed us that there were 70,000 registered charities at that time. That was in 1969. There's probably about maybe 300,000 charities now, registered charities. So it was actually refused. And one of the legal firms that we chose was called Goodman and Derrick. They were the Prime Minister's, then Harold Wilson was the Prime Minister then. And Goodman and Derrick were his lawyers, or solicitors. And one of them applied on our behalf to the Charity Commission, and the Charity Commission refused it. The ISKCON couldn't be a charity. It was kind of a religious organization. So this gentleman reapplied. And when I first talked to him, and he said that the application had gone through and they had a response from the Charity Commission. And I said, oh, that's very good, that's great. And he said, well, it's not so great because they've refused you. So we instructed him to reapply. And then they said, well, it took about 6 months, but the reply came back and they said, well, this is a borderline case, but we're going to grant you, it was a 6-page judgment sort of thing, and granting us a charitable status, granting ISKCON a charitable status, as opposed to a religious status. And because we talked about in the application, we talked about all our so-called charitable activities, giving clothes and giving medicine and food and that sort of thing. So the judgment said that yeah, they would grant us a charitable condition, but it would be a provisional, and they would watch us very carefully for the next few years to see if we actually abided by our rules. And our charitable status at one time was almost revoked because the Charity Commission had learned that we were doing things like selling paintings for money, and we were on the brink of losing our charitable status, which some other people did lose their charitable status. So that tactic was abandoned, fortunately, and charitable status continued, and I think it still continues. And it's a good thing to have a charitable status, because there's certain benefits that you can get. So charity is considered a good thing, not only by the Bhagavad Gita and by instructions of Krishna, but by governments who for anybody that is charitable or gives in charity, they tend to be favorable, and political leaders tend to be favorable to persons who give in charity, and very, very wealthy persons, like Rupert Murdoch is one of them, Bill Gates is another one. I know that Gates, I don't know about Rupert Murdoch, but I know that Gates is well known for his charitable attitude, that he's given some charity. Of course, he may be giving it for ulterior reasons, or ulterior motives may be involved. Nonetheless, charity is a good thing for someone who can offer it. And for someone to give an entire kingdom, or the entire world, is a great act of charity, and therefore Bali is immortalized as a Mahajan and a great giver of charity. In a sense, he's a personification of charitable giving, because he gave everything in himself, his kingdom, and everything in it to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is considered a very wonderful thing. To give a little bit of charity is actually a good thing, but to give a lot of charity is a better thing, and to give everything, especially if you have a lot of things, is even a greater thing. Of course, charitably minded people who have nothing, give nothing. Once, when I was in Vrindavan, a devotee used to sort of poo-poo all the beggars that lived in Vrindavan, asking for a few paisa or a few rupees here and there, and with their hands outstretched. And he routinely would refuse to give them anything, because once I've heard this story, that there were some people in India that were begging, and Prabhupada said, well, they're professional beggars, so we won't give them anything. And he asked them to chant Hare Krishna, and they did things according to the stories Prabhupada told, like they would maim themselves and put their arms out on the railroad track so they'd get run over by railroad trains, and it was easier to beg when they only had one arm, and things like that. Things like this go on. It sounds very bizarre, but actually it happened, or it's still happening probably. So this devotee routinely refused to give everything to the beggars. And then later on, I don't know what changed his mind, I'm not going to mention names, but he started giving them a few paisa, or a few coins, because they were actually inhabitants of Vrindavan. Maybe some of them were professional beggars, but he concluded that most of them probably weren't, and that they were just very poor people that needed handouts. So that's one of the things that was done. Prabhupada, in a famous letter to Kirtananda, I think it was written in 1973, said that we should study the principle, or we should discuss the principle of what he called unity and diversity. That's another way of stressing or saying achintya veda veda tata. I'm not a Sanskritist, but achintya, from what I know, means inconceivable, and veda abeda means oneness and difference, simultaneous one and difference. Prabhupada told us that his devotees could have successful arguments with even very learned scholars on the principle that achintya veda tata. It's kind of unknown in very learned circles that there is such a thing as simultaneous oneness and difference. In a sense, it doesn't make any sense that something can be one and different at the same time. But that's the philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and it's a very deep thing. And as Prabhupada said, it should be in this letter to Kirtananda in 1973, that it should be discussed every year, meaning that it couldn't be concluded what simultaneously one and difference, or unity and diversity, would be in one session. That it would go over many years before people could actually ascertain what it meant, unity and diversity. It's a slogan that's been adopted by the European Union and other people. And there's even an organization in the United States called Unity in Diversity. And it's interesting that people, even though they adopt this slogan, it's a very interesting and very kind of intellectually penetrating and evocative saying, but to actually practice it and to know what it means is not so easy to do. And as Prabhupada said, it would take many years. And the sages of Naimisharanya, for example, had a meeting for, they met for 1,000 years. They agreed to talk, and they were all very learned people. And yet it would take over 1,000 years for them to come to decisive conclusions about what should happen in the world now that Kali Yuga had set in and Krishna has vanished from our sight. So, and then Niranjan Swami, who will be coming here shortly, probably lecturing, I don't know, not every day, but a few times, talks about what he called the difference between substance and form, which is another form of unity and diversity. Substance being the Hare Krishna mantra, and form being everything else. Of course, he has a lot of followers and disciples, but everything else being like personal issues and personal problems, and that's a kind of form, and that substance is chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, which is the solution, in a sense, to all problems that exist in the material world, or even anywhere, any kind of problems. And it's kind of interesting that when I was in New Zealand, I was speaking with a person who was a lawyer, and he became a politician at one time. But he said in the legal conferences that he attended, they used these very same terms, substance and form. And substance was the spirit of the law, and form was the letter of the law. So good judges and good barristers, solicitors, lawyers understand that they have to make the good decisions are made on the basis of what the law means, not what it's not the words in which it says. They concentrate on the spirit rather than on the form, or on the substance, which is the spirit, rather than the form, which are the words. If that makes any sense. So I think it's time to stop now for any comments or questions. Yes, Prabhupada.
Name of the law in Goodman and Goodman.
We're going to give you the microphone.
The name of the firm which you use, Goodman and Goodman, the first lawyer. Then I amended the whole constitution because as you say, we were doing many things which were not covered under charity. So I redrafted the whole constitution, and then everything what we were doing was within the ambit of the charity commission. We once nearly lost our status.
For those of you who don't know, Prabhupada Das was a practicing lawyer and a justice of the peace and an academic lawyer in England. Now he's, I think, retired. Is that correct? But a very learned individual.
You were talking about the charity in India. You give 1 rupee to the beggar, he says you have it back, I can give you 2. So there are millionaires now, a lot of them are. Then I'm poor. And another, there is a difference between in Australia and England. In England, when you give to the charity like a scone, the charity gets 30 or 40% tax goes to the charity. In this country, I give it to the temple, I get 25 or whatever 20%. That's the difference. That's why charities want to have more and more money. They can have not only what you give them, but also the government gives them.
So, from what Prabhupada has written, the best charities are charities that are given to ISKCON or Vaishnavas. That's the best charity. Of course, we give to all kinds of causes, but the best causes are the causes that are involved with Vaishnavas and ISKCON.
Because at one time we were losing a lot of money from especially from the Indian community. So I started this deed of covenant for ISKCON. So the donor will get the discount and the charity gets it. So
it's a very
that's
good,
why
it's a very good system.
Because we were all taking advantage. Government was getting bankrupt. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Legal or otherwise?
I just wanted to know, do they still get benefit for charity even if it's for more of a mundane?
Do
they still get benefit for charity even if it's more mundane, like Save the Refugees?
I think so. I think so.
Like for Krishna, they'll get benefit on that.
You get benefits on the spiritual level if you give to Vaishnavas and ISKCON. And I think somewhere it said that charity is returned in 4 times. Like if you give $1 to ISKCON, you get, in this life or in the future life, you get $4 back. Or by unlimited multiplication actually says that if you give to a good cause, it's 4 times, and if you give to ISKCON or Vaishnavas, you get a return that's called unlimited. So if you give $1, you get millions of dollars back. Yes?
I found it very interesting what you said about the spirit of the law and later. How can we know, for example, with Prabhupada's purports, we take the words very seriously, we might lose the spirit of the law, or then we also might try to capture the spirit of the law, but then we fall into speculations of how do we...
If you give to Krishna or ISKCON, that's the best form of charity. So you don't have to really find a balance, because if you give to anyone who's related to ISKCON, that's the best charity. I don't know if that's a complete answer, but that's one thing you can be sure of. Prabhupada, I think he indirectly says that too, in the purports and in his other teachings.
One has to use one's intelligence. Who really deserves the charity? I mean, in India, my mother-in-law used to give charity to people who used to come and bag at the house and they were smoking. And I used to tell her, all that money you are giving him, he will be just buying a cigarette. So we have to be very careful. Who we give the charity?
Yeah.
If it's misused, then you have no benefit of it. You won't get 4 times in your next life if you give it to the wrong.
Yeah, the Bhagavad Gita describes different types of charities. Charities in the mode of goodness, in the mode of passion, in the mode of ignorance. So that's a very important caveat.
Can I read something from the 16th chapter?
Please.
It's about charity. Srila Prabhupada says in the purport to 16:1-3, the next item is charity. Charity is meant for the householders. The householders should earn livelihood by honourable means and spend 50% of their income to propagate Krishna consciousness all over the world. Thus, a householder should give charity to institutional societies that are engaged in that way. Charity should be given to the right receiver. There are different kinds of charity, as will be explained later on. Charity in the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Charity in the mode of goodness is recommended by the scriptures, but charity in the mode of passion and ignorance is not recommended because it is simply a waste of money. Charity should only be given to propagate Krishna consciousness all over the world. That is charity in the mode of goodness.
Thank you. So I think unless there's something urgent, I think we'll end now, if that's all right. And breakfast is served. Hare Krishna.